Welcome to the Irrelevant Podcast. I'm Nathan Jones with my co-host Alex Lewis, back for episode 20 with Cooper Napoli, who you heard about last week on the Pat episode, or the bald Ned Flanders, as he likes to tell himself.
2 weeks ago.
Was it 2 weeks ago? Oh my God, bless.
You're so fucking rude. Kim was last week.
Did
Jesus
you hear?
Christ.
Yeah, I screwed up the intro last week also. I said that it was episode 18. Man, I got to get some more sleep. But anyway, this one's a round number, episode 20. Big one. Big episode. So we have to
get one more, and we're in the top 1% of podcasters.
Do you know that, Cooper?
I did not know that. Is that like the episode count to get to that point?
Yeah.
21 is 1%.
I'm glad I could be a brick in your foundation then.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. I was shocked because I thought the data was a little better, but it's actually more favorable to us now. The tweet that Alex sent me says that we'll be in the 1% of podcasters that make it past episode 20. So
that's cool. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah. I think it just takes a little dedication. I don't know if we're really special or anything.
That's pretty sweet. We have enough free time.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
Well, Coop, we heard a little bit about you on Pat's episode, obviously, and
Sure.
from his point of view. But go ahead and tell these wonderful people who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then we'll kind of get into the nuances of what you've become later on. So, anything you want to start off with?
Yeah. So, I'm 26 now. I live in Lafayette, Colorado, which is kind of like a Boulder suburb. Lived here for only like a couple months now. Just moved down. I opened up a gym in Vail, Colorado, and then just got very sick and tired of the mountains, and decided to bring it on back down here to the Front Range. But yeah, kind of before that, I can tally it up if we kind of want to spend a little more time on that topic. Just the sheer volume amount of times. But I was military, so was my dad. So I bounced around all over the fucking place. Over the years, I think almost equivalent to the 26 that I've been on this earth at this point. That's kind of a little bit of the background there. Been in strength and conditioning now for 6 years. Got my first job. It would have been when I was 20, turning 21. And then I think like a month into it, after starting out at a gym called Equinox in Chicago. It's like kind of a bigger luxury gym chain, which is where Pat and I know each other from. Just kind of took it from there and have been hammering away ever since.
So you started when you were 20, 21. Mm-hmm. What was your initial thoughts of getting into the strength and conditioning realm, and how did you think that Equinox was the way to go to get into this kind of?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of start by saying, but before I had thought I was going to do a million different things until training just kind of one day fell into my lap as an opportunity. When I went into an Equinox as a member, and was kind of like, oh, this is a luxury gym. This is really nice, and the trainers are really well dressed, and everything looks super awesome. Because kind of the only real strength and conditioning coaching I'd had prior to that was I think it was my senior year in high school when when we finally had a legitimate strength and conditioning coach. It wasn't just some ex-military guys, kind of taking us through let's go push some cars and do some random shit out here on the pull-up bars we built for you guys. And so it was my senior year. It was a guy who had done a lot of stuff with starting strength, and that was really it. I was like, oh, this is really, really cool, but I'm I don't want to be a high school teacher, strength and conditioning coach hybrid here. I have other things I want to do. And so went to West Point, was there for about a year as a cadet. Fucking hated it, and ended up leaving. And when I went back home to Chicago, kind of I was a fucking econ major. When I was there, it was I don't particularly give a shit about any of this stuff. The Equinox looks pretty nice, and clearly they pay their trainers well enough for them to wear cool shoes with their black uniform. So I was fuck it, why not try this out? I'd personally been writing programs and like doing things on my own, since I was probably like 15, 16. So I guess I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been doing it well for probably 3. And I've been doing it like thing to do for, if I had to kind of, space some things out there.
So when you said you were writing programs at 15, what got you into writing programs when you were 15? Like, was there a specific book or a specific article that you'd read or anything like that like was like, oh, this is kind of cool?
Yeah, it was more so just like getting bullied, where I was like, you know what, like, and not like, I mean, yeah, sure, like every high school kid in America got bullied,
Right.
one way or another. But it was more just like when I'm actually on the lacrosse field, that was kind of the sport I played growing up. I'm getting like fucked up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like I wanted to do it at a really high level. And it was just like I'm getting beat up, kind of like more severe injuries. Like I would say, like when I was 16, I had the worst low back pain I'd ever had in my life. And it was just kind of like I'm frustrated, I'm not getting any better at the things I need to get better at. I'm getting tossed around when I get on the field, because I just can't really put 2 and 2 together. And then it was my dad kind of played a big role. He was like, yeah, you're a scrawny little bitch, and you need to put some size on. And then proceeded to give me like workouts that like definitely wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? And all that, but kind of the intent to help was there. And I started to kind of realize like, oh, like, I do like this stuff. It is a way for me to like not sit on the ground and play video games in my basement, all summer and kind of mix things up. And yeah, it was really there where I started. And T Nation, Elite FTS, like those were kind of the 2 publications that were like bodybuilding.com also being one that were like super readily available. Like I remember like, obviously, like I think bodybuilding.com had something like insanely thorough forum that Arnold was a big part of, like look to that stuff. I remember John Meadows, God rest that man's soul, being like a big factor and sort of like, oh, this is like cool shit to learn. And that was actually probably around like the first time I started hearing about like Westside Barbell, which is funny that I actually ended up going there for a certain period of time, a little later on.
I think it's funny that you said that like your dad was trying to help you, because I remember back, like my dad had these old concrete weights in the basement that he used when he was like 16. And he was like, I don't really know what you're supposed to do on those things, but just go down there and do some bench press, do some overhead press, do some like high cleans with them, and like you'll get stronger. Do like 100 reps or something. And I'm like, okay, like just me down there thinking I'm pumping out my brain and getting huge. And I'm like this, and then looking back and I'm like, the intention, like it's funny you said the intention was good, but I was like, that's funny because I did the same thing.
Yeah, I'm like, my low back hurts like 10 times fucking worse now, and my shoulder feels like someone's stabbing it with an ice pick, but I think I get it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
It's like
because I like the way my arms look a little more now.
Yeah, it's like the high school strength coach. Yeah, I think it's because they're like, their intent is always really good, or even just like your football coach or any coach that knows like, hey, the weights thing needs to be a part of the culture that we have for our sports team, and they try really hard, and they're like, oh yeah, like, but they really have no direction and they don't know what they're doing, but they always know it should be some form of bench, some form of squat, and some form of deadlift, and maybe some overhead press. But the programs that you read when they write them are just like, this is not it. But the intent's pretty decent, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, everyone would consider like themselves very righteous for even setting foot in the door of, our industry, right? Like, I am here to help people. I am the paladin of, this division of the universe, and I will protect, these people by making them stronger. And then they just end up shattering them. And, the impact ends up not really matching the intent, which is like a huge issue. That's like a huge issue that I, personally think is just, it's never going to go away, but it can be made better, at least with the stuff we do.
So you said you found your way to Westside. I'm sure that'll pique somebody's interest who's actually listening to the podcast. Bill, if you're listening, shout out you. There's some Westside moments on there. But awesome. So you went to West Point, came back, didn't like it, found your way to Equinox. Did you find your way to Westside after Equinox?
Yeah, so West Side was actually I decided to enlist in the Marine Corps after I kind of ended up not liking West Point. I had trained super hard, for about like 2 years. Was lucky to kind of at my first job at Equinox. I'll kind of start here because this is really where I got led to West Side. I obviously had like very limited college experience, other than getting into West Point and kind of like going and getting really shitty grades there, and doing like a quarter at DePaul, which is like a university in Chicago. After that, like, and I kind of was like, I have no fucking college degree, but I'm gonna just go all in on this training thing and really try and make it happen at Equinox. So I um, put in an application. My mom had trained with a woman who was, very very good coach there. So I, kind of had a little bit of a at least an introduction, right, to kind of get my name out there. Um, did like this massive group interview, and then ended up getting hired by a guy named Todd Anderson. So he's now the founder, CEO of a company called Dream Recovery. I mean, he does like a lot of really, really cool stuff with sleep. Does all sorts of stuff. He was a walk on at Michigan State, and then was later, drafted into the NFL. It was just like a fucking awesome guy, really cool story. But he took a huge chance, hiring me. Um, and I kind of, really looked up to him at the time and was just like, anything this dude says, I'm gonna do. So I ended up signing up for my first ever powerlifting meet, and he gave me this like DUP program, very Bulgarian style, that I ran for about 8 weeks, and added a lot to my total, but it damn near killed me. In the process, like my hips were just so fucking shot. Low back was starting to kind of get a little achy again. And he was like, well, if you can survive that, and you can, clearly, have, an ability to add some amount of strength, you should look into doing the West Side Barbell Special Strength Cert. And I was like, okay, well, I've heard of that before, and it sounds cool, but like, I don't necessarily like love powerlifting or anything like that. And he's like, not for powerlifting. He's like, this is like a program I used when I was training in college, and then like in the NFL, just getting like, and especially after that, when he was like, just getting brutally strong because he liked it. And so that was kind of like my first like, okay, West Side is not just for power lifters like I had read, in the past. It's not just for getting stronger. It's about like becoming a better athlete. And, there's this whole skeleton and process. So bought the course, got all the books, and I kind of made a promise to myself that was like, okay, I think at the time, I don't know if this is still how they do it, but it was like you have 6 months to kind of read all this stuff, and make it through all the coursework. Um, and so I kind of made a commitment to do a little bit better than that, which was to, for the next year, after I finished the West Side stuff, every single book I read, every single podcast I listen to is going to be solely focused on training and training related content. And so I did that. And I took the cert, passed it, first go, was like really excited. And kind of like during the tail end of that process, started training with a guy named Joe Lasco. So if you guys are familiar with him, his handle on Instagram is Special Strengths. And he's a excellent fucking human being. I love that guy. My mustache is inspired largely by him.
I was gonna ask you that. I thought it was a little bit.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Joe style.
he's very wholesome guy, very smart, wholesome guy.
Super wholesome dude. Yeah, I love him to death. And so once kind of Todd, who like played a huge factor just in really getting me serious about this shit, so to speak. Joe kind of molded that through the actual practice of experiencing West Side, because at the time he was still technically working there. And so I was able to have kind of one person who'd lived it at West Side, one person who'd trained in that style, and then went on to use that stuff to perform at like an insanely high level, making it all the way to the fucking NFL, which is like insane. And then just started to kind of get involved in the community a little bit more, right? People like us today, and yeah, just spoke with those guys, for hours and hours and hours. And eventually, kind of used Joe to train me up to go become a Marine and try out for Marine reconnaissance, which ended up not happening for me. Got injured and had like a total mental health break, which was like one of a few that I'd had, kind of just being in these stressful situations, growing up, moving all over the place, kind of having like establishing a friend group, then having to burn it down because I'm moving to halfway across the country and then back and forth and back and forth, like but was able to, I guess, prove myself well enough to Joe that once I did get out of the Marine Corps and kind of came back into the training world, less so as an athlete and more so as someone who like wanted to be like the most excellent coach who ever lived, which is today like could give less of a shit about, which is kind of funny. But was like, I need to go to West Side. I need to learn from the man himself. And yeah, Louis was, kind enough to kind of take in a 150-pound Marine dropout who just did not have any idea what the hell was going on in the world at the time. And take me in for 8 weeks and tell me that I'm still a skinny bitch and need to put some size on. And yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
So for perspective for people who see you now, what's like your current, like what weight do you weigh currently right now?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go through that. When I was a freshman in high school, I was 130 pounds, right? If you want to be a Division I lacrosse player, that's not going to fly. If you want to play any Division I sport, other than like cross country, you're just kind of, writing yourself into a corner pretty quickly, I think, especially because I was like 5'10", probably by my like sophomore year of high school. And so I was pretty skinny, but by like my senior year, got up to about 180. And then I think when I went into the Marine Corps, I was about 190, and then was 150 when I came out. Because they don't feed you particularly well. You don't sleep particularly well, and kind of having like a really bad injury and then like a really, really bad concussion with it. In a string of bad concussions I kind of had over the course of my athletic career, it was just like got out, brain was mush, kind of looked, a little bit skinny fat. Test was that of like a 70-year-old man. And then I put 20 pounds on in 8 weeks at Westside. I went from like 150 to 170. And then I didn't really stop bulking until I got up to, at the highest, 217. And now I float pretty around 195, and am the strongest I've ever been, just at any weight, at 195 right now, which is kind of a sweet spot I've found for all three lifts, squat, bench, and dead, to kind of make some progress. Because I don't power lift, but I enjoy getting stronger at lifts, and amongst a bunch of others that I like performing as well. And so yeah, was kind of able to get to 217. Had a hard time going upstairs and breathing for a little bit there, and then have dropped back since. So,
Alex, you got anything? Care to chime in?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Doing great.
So you spend this time at Westside, and then you have all this wonderful wealth of information that Louis has given you. Well, first of all, what was your biggest takeaway from Louis? Like, what did you take away the most from Westside?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny that you asked that, because I had spent, I mean, that whole year, which was, this is before I even went into the Marine Corps, learning a bunch of shit, right? I listened to every single video I think he'd ever released. I had read every single book he had ever released. I had watched all the DVDs. I had read all the books he just said that you should fucking read if you want to be good at this. So when I got there, I kind of didn't have any questions for him. And he was like, well, clearly you know your shit. Why are you so fucking weak? Right. And like, why are your like triceps like virtually non-existent on the back of your arm? He's like, clearly you're smart and you know what the fuck you're talking about. And at that point it was just kind of like, well, I guess I just need to fucking do the thing, don't I? And so, Louis and I had a bunch of awesome conversations. And of course, he taught me a lot of the nuance, especially in terms of like variation selection. But really, like, I think what it came down to was just like, he's like, look, dude, like no one is ever going to respect you unless you get big or strong or both. And if you want to actually be the best possible strength and conditioning coach you can be, you just need more time under the bar, whatever that means, in the specific context you want to get people good at. And so I guess, what did he teach me? He taught me that I should probably, just shut the fuck up and train. And that's kind of been my motto, for years now. And when my athletes start, kind of bitching, moaning, complaining about one thing or another, it kind of all comes down to like, yeah, like maybe we need to make some adjustments, but you should probably just shut the fuck up and train. Right. Because this is like, you are still going, like, no matter what, you're injured, you're fucking hurt, like bad shit's happening in your personal life, like you're still going to have to show up and put in the hours if you want to get good at the thing you want to get good at. And so that's kind of the major takeaway I guess I got from him was like, just fucking do it, man. Like, stop fucking thinking you want to do this or that. Just shut the fuck up and train. And that's worked really well. And so I did that, for 3 years. I actually did that, so to speak. And, in a lot of his books, he talks about, like GPP being like one of the most important things, and talking about like Olympic cycles and all that stuff. And so for 3 years, I did GPP stuff. All I did, I squatted and I benched and I deadlifted and I did like, some more specific things from time to time. I body built my way up to 217. I, didn't touch a barbell bench or a barbell deadlift or squat for about a year, the last year of that. And now I've been kind of back to a bunch of that shit for a year, right? Doing more specific things. And I've, added almost like 200 pounds to my total in like 6 months since finishing that 3-year block up. Which I think kind of shows the power of the, the system that he preaches, and the true value of GPP, which was, for me, like played lacrosse and, was kind of like cardiovascularly extremely fit, always have been. It's always been extremely easy. Like, remember, I didn't run for 2 years, and the first 2 runs back, I was running 6-minute miles again when I started training for the Marine Corps stuff, right? So like, God gave me speed and God gave me like endurance. Those were his gifts to me physically. And then when it came to actually putting more fucking pounds on the bar, no. When it came to actually, getting a 315 bench, naturally, like he's like, no. But when it came to sumo deadlifts, I got a little bit more of a bump there. I think as well. And so, dude, I just put myself against like the fucking lathe, man. I just did that for 3 years, tried a bunch of shit, did a bunch of plyos, did a bunch of bodybuilding, did a bunch of cardio, did a bunch of single joint stuff, compound stuff, learned a bunch from the guys over at N1 training, learned a bunch of stuff from FRC, got really mobile, did this, did that, did the other, and kind of found like a sweet spot between everything, where I was able to, actually do what the system preaches, which is gradually raise all physical capacities a little bit slower than, say, if you were doing more of like the block periodization type stuff. And now I'm like, I would kick the living shit out of any version of my younger self at anything, at this stage of life. And that's a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree completely.
Yeah.
So 3 years of GPP, and most people don't even want to go through 12 weeks of GPP. No thanks.
Nope. and that's where shut the fuck up and train is, right? When I was at Westside, it was interesting, because I was one of the weakest people there, if not the weakest, a lot of times, just in terms of pounds on the bar. And so, a lot of my role there while guys were lifting, while we were actually, while I was watching Louis coach and watching things go on, was, a lot of people don't want to put faith in the man, right? They don't want to, for whatever reason, they don't want to put faith in their coach because they think what they're doing is somehow better, and that their like, esoteric athletic intuition, athletic IQ is just like so good that they can kind of ignore the coaching. And I saw that while I was there, and I was kind of dumbfounded by it, right? Because I'm like, this is a man who's like been there, done that, in multiple arenas, UFC world champions. He's got, some guys who won gold medals in track and field events. And then, you just stand next to the guy, listen to him talk, and he's going to like pull out this like new guy from New Zealand who's really into fucking sheep shearing races, which is when you like shave a fucking sheep, put all the shit in a barrel and run up and down a fucking mountain. And it's like, he's like, yeah, I got the guy to win that. And you're just sort of like, okay, like, the guy's done some weird fucking shit. Oh fuck. There's one really cool one. I think it was Norwegian Special Forces where at the end of selection or something, you like basically climb up this crane. And I could be completely wrong about it being Norwegian, but somewhere in Europe. You climb up this crane and you drop into the water from 80 feet. And like, if your body doesn't break, like you're good. And like, you can kind of continue on with the training. If it does break, you weren't strong enough. And they kind of like made this kind of thing into a sport over there. And some guys who like basically needed to handle that kind of impact came to Westside and trained for it. And then they went and they did really good. Right.
Wow.
And like, CrossFit Games athletes, like you name it, man, he's fucking trained them and they all got fucking better. Just because they got fucking stronger, they got faster, they did his versions of whatever they had them do. These special exercises, did all that shit. So, for someone who's equipped powerlifting to kind of look at the man and basically tell him, fuck you, I'm not going to do that. In the sport where he has the most like proficiency and practice was just like fucking wild to me. And so it was just like, kind of crazy to watch. I am forgetting what the original question was that you asked me that led me to that endpoint there. But yeah, I mean, dude, when Louis says something, you fucking do it, right? Like, it's like, and he told me you need to go get fucking strong and get bigger for 3 years. Like, he's like, don't fucking worry about like powerlifting. Don't worry about any of this shit. Just go like do shit for 3 years and like become an actual fucking, like someone who can actually do that. And I did. And I was really fucking happy to like be done with that 3 years when I got there. Cause I was like, I want to see what I can throw on my fucking back and what I can sit down and stand up with now. And it has been exponential,
Yeah.
over that period of time. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that. If I'm remembering the question now, it was like, sort of like, what was that 3 years like,
Yeah.
kind of, like what, people aren't even willing to do 12 weeks. And yeah, they're fucking not, and it's kicking their ass. And I think that a lot of athletes, obviously, like, time constraints are a thing, right? Like, hey, you're a motherfucking senior in high school, or about to be a senior year in high school. It's spring, and you have like what, 4 or 5 months before you start your fall season for football. It's like, yeah, we only have so much we can do. I'm like, you already aren't going to fucking make it to the level that you think you're going to make it to, probably because you didn't spend years leading up to this just doing anything, period. And now you're telling me you want to be a Division I, whatever the fuck. And I'm, so it's just not going to work. And I'm okay with that. But I'm going to still fucking try and get you there. Right. And like, would I have someone do just like raw GPP shit that whole time? Fuck no. It's too slow. You just need to kind of, get them more confident through weightlifting over that period at that point. And a good way to do that is to, like squat, bench, and deadlift, so that they just feel like they can clang and bang. And they probably won't, but that's okay. At least they think they can.
Yeah. Yeah, they think they're strong. It's always funny to see when people come, or kids especially, they're like, yeah, I'm pretty strong. I'm reasonably strong. I'm like, you don't know what strength even is. I'm not even to a level of where I feel I'm strong comparatively to what actual strength numbers are. And like these kids are like, yeah, I'm strong. Like, no, you're not. You're going to break like a fragile little human being when you get, because like at a high school level, it's, you can be strong-ish and get away with a lot of things, especially in football. Oh, yeah. Like you can kind of set yourself aside from other people to just compete at above level than most high schoolers. But then it's like you're saying, you're asking this kid to go to a Division I level and then compete with people that are well exceeding where you're probably at. You're going to get crunched and you're going to get hurt because you didn't dedicate yourself to actually becoming a Division I athlete. You didn't do the prep work way back when you needed to be doing the prep work.
Completely. And I think that's like not like, I think a lot of times I hear coaches like they blame the kids a lot, for that. And I'm like, I mean, to an extent, but like how much can like one person reasonably research into strength and conditioning?
That's a weak
Like,
cop out. That's a weak cop out. Well, I hate when coaches are like, it's the kid's fault. I'm like, no, it's not, because the
not really,
information is
man.
available. You just have to present
Yeah.
it to them in a way that they can digest it. I hate that cop out.
Yeah. And like, I mean, there what becomes really tricky, especially at that age, when you kind of just are a weapon to be pointed at a target and shot in any direction. You're very like moldable, and you're very like easy to just be like, I'm training, so therefore I'm getting better. Meanwhile, you're working with like someone who really just doesn't understand how the human body works, or you have someone with like really good intention, and it feels really nice to like work with someone who gives a fuck about you and like be around people who give a fuck about you, but they can't actually make the impact they're trying to make. Right. And that's such a fucking issue. And that like, that's where, like for me, like a lot of the things I wanted to do physically and mentally, I just didn't have the toughness for. Because I didn't actually like a lot of people had good intention, but like fucking horrible impact, negative impact on my actual training and my actual development. Had to like unlearn a bunch of shit. And then now I'm like, yeah, now I'm like, there's still some shit I'm like, I just like am not built to do, and don't want to fucking do. Um, but like, I definitely understand how I could, objectively go about improving in a certain direction. And I think, yeah, like that's what really like I think is the biggest issue is there's a lot of coaches out there who, love all these feel good posts and love to make their athletes feel like, they're having a good time, having fun. But when they actually when you actually go back and check that work, it's kind of bullshit. Um, and then, you see guys like, what's I think you've had him on the podcast, is it Bird? Who's got all like the freak fucking kids jumping like,
Yeah.
I forget like his exact metrics. The guy's a fucking great coach.
Yeah,
though.
absolutely.
And it's like, well, he's like taking all the local kids from this area and like making them Division I athletes before they become Division I athletes, and then they become Division I athletes, and it's like, yeah, that's a guy who like matches intent with impact. Like, you want to be a better fucking football player, like you're gonna be one.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna hit harder, run faster, recover quicker, and get less injured. Uh, and that's the kind of shit where I'm like, those are the coaches who we need to make more of.
I
And
think
it's not actually as hard as a lot of people think.
Well, I see it a lot cyclically in the high school setting too, because you have 4 years to develop, or at least you're going to have 4 years of this kid in your program. And it's like, well, why do the good programs not fall off? Like, there's some schools around here that they win and they win and they win and they win, and their players look developed every freaking year. And it's like, those coaches aren't satisfied with, well, it's just a bad year, or this is a bad class, or these kids are not what we need them to be. It's like, no, they just put their heads down, go to work, and try to figure out how to make them better at what they're doing. And so, like, I think that separates a lot of high school coaches in the sports setting, especially, that have to put on a lot of hats and do like the strength work and the coaching work. But it's like, they're willing to do it. They're not just willing to be like, well, these kids aren't as good as those kids that we just had. They don't have the ceiling that those kids had. They just make them better. And like, I think those coaches get separated so easily, and it's so easy to tell like what cultures and what systems are really good, because it's like, okay, well, they're just putting talent out year in and year out. So it's like, we need more of that, is what I'm saying. Is like, there's got to be more of that out there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And so the high school I went to is an all boys boarding school in Connecticut called Avon Old Farms. And like, looking at the program there now, that they have for strength and conditioning, it's like they have a coach who definitely like, knows his stuff. They have, kind of created this like sort of athletic farm, almost, where they're pumping like someone's going Division I on almost every fucking varsity team. And I remember like even my junior year, the first year we had strength and conditioning, I believe our entire starting lineup in lacrosse was going to play Division One. I think except for like maybe one kid who was like a total fucking freak at football, um, who went to play Division One in that sport. And like we won the New England Championship that year. Now, I don't attribute that to strength and conditioning because it was a new program and all these kids had done work in the years leading up to that prior. That was like that's what got them to this point where we had that kind of caliber of team. And it was nuts. You know what I mean? It was like absolutely fucking nuts to just see where they're at now and how fucking competitive it is in that league where every single team in that conference has strength and conditioning coaches. Every single team is like, finding ways to work around the rules in terms of like when you can play with your high school team so you can get more reps. It's a mini fucking college now. And they're having like guys from the NFL come and do like football camps. Like they just had like a former Patriots offensive line coach come and like teach these guys stuff and just like it's insane, man. Like the amount of like time, energy, and effort that goes into producing that kind of caliber of athlete is really just insane. I think it's both like it's extremely contingent on strength and conditioning, but it's also like strength and conditioning is one of a million factors that gets you there. And I just don't think that it's we can always blame ourselves, but we also can like almost never really blame ourselves. When it comes to that. But when you do get the opportunity to work with kids, if you're not able to make them better than they were when they came to you, that sucks. That sucks bad.
Yeah, it seems to be not a hard equation to do. I don't know, Alex, you've chimed in on this a lot. Like making kids better doesn't seem like that hard of a job. And like I've tended to notice that just in the few short years that I've done this. It's like you can't really do anything wrong because everything's so new, but it's not about you don't want to waste time with them because they do have a limited amount of time with you. So it's like finding what is optimal for them is way better than just throwing all this random stuff, obviously, that could work, but probably will work because they're so new to everything. So
yeah,
kids are, I don't know. Sometimes they're tricky. It's like, good Lord, they don't want to train either. Most of the kids don't actually want to do what training actually entails. So getting them to buy into that is also kind of a tricky nuance as well. But
yeah, I don't really work with a ton of kids, although I like definitely have opinions on like how I think kids should be trained. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I've worked with like a handful here and there, but it makes me fucking miserable. Because like they're just like kind of concerned with like, at least a lot of them are like, well, where am I going to go drink this weekend? Or like, where am I going to go like fucking party? Where is the girl I like going to be at? Where is the guy I like going to be at?
There's too much crap. Like, yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm not having this fucking, like, I don't give a fuck like about this. And like, at least in my opinion, like with adults, it's like, they've kind of lost the mysticism of just like being a human being in general, and they're like able to kind of hunker down and focus on shit. I think a lot easier than a lot of kids are, and that's to no fault of the kids. They all have to go to school. They all have to be a part of this process, and like I think it just their lives are like equally as difficult, if not more difficult than a lot of the adults. And just like all those like moving targets, moving factors, changing interests, bodies changing, hormones changing. It's just like for me, it's like a nightmare because then you also have to fucking work with their parents who fucking usually suck. And that's like kind of really the reason why I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to market towards this population.
Well, that's what got me out of teaching. That's completely what got. I was like, I'm tired of coaching in this sector with kids. I don't want the opinions of where my program should go based on parents. I don't want the administrators caving to the parents because they always will. It just got really old, like listening to this infinite loophole of like, you can't win. And with kids, you can't win because it's like, you're banging your head against the wall all the time, like talking about sleep habits, talking about eating habits, talking about how to get to the next step of your development. And there's just literally like, you ask them their check-in questions every day and they're like, yeah, I went to bed at midnight. I played video games until 2 a.m. I ate Funyuns for breakfast. Like, it's just infinite cycle of completely unoptimal. So
yeah, and I'm like, look, man, you don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. Like, okay, like play video games. I don't give a fuck. Like, if you want to play video games, dude, like, awesome. Like, sweet. I fucking love video games. I can talk to you about playing video games all day. But like, you're not gonna get better at football. And like, you talk like you want to get better at football, but you don't actually want to get better at football or, you know, lacrosse or hockey. Or
they like the thought of it.
Baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's fun to think about. You know, it's fun to think about being like the ultra cool hero hotshot, you know, sexy Division I athlete. But you know, and I would actually argue, like, a lot of guys who end up going to play Division I anyway, I'm like, well, you know, you're probably pretty tall. You probably have a predisposition to putting on muscle, and it's like, okay, you want to go fucking play pro? Because like, I mean, I think in today's day and age, when we were all coming up, like, you know, you weren't making a fucking dime playing in college, right? But now, like, you know, like, hey, these kids can actually make, you know, a bunch of fucking money, which I think is a really good thing for high school kids, because I think it will make them serious about like actually thinking that it matters to go to college. Because, you know, you can go make a fucking small fortune now if you play quarterback for Alabama.
Right.
You know, if you play quarterback at any, you know, Power 5 fucking school, you know, you're not going to leave more poor than you came in unless you handle your money like a fucking dipshit. And you know, I think that we're only going to see more money flow into that, and I think it's a good thing, right? Because now high school kids may actually make the better decision between those two things, you know, knowing sort of full well that like it ain't gonna fucking matter, you know, because they're not gonna go pro anyway. It's like, well, no, I can make it to fucking college. Like, you know,
right.
I can like be a practice player and probably make at least $30K a year.
Those 4 extra years can really mean something now, for sure.
Yeah, I could leave college with like over $100,000 like in my pocket, like, you know, which is like fucking massive. So you know, I'm hoping that's the way things change. Certainly in the circles I was in growing up, like that's definitely like the vibe. Like, you know, I was really fortunate to go to the school that I went to. You know, they have fucking nutritionists, they have like psychologists, sports psychologists, they have it all. You know, they run it like a little mini college, you know, team, all that shit. And I think that's like really fucking cool. And I think a lot more people need to take their lives seriously enough to actually like take that approach and leverage all those kinds of things. And
yeah, those are the places for the kids that know they're going to get there and not just hope and dream to get there, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
So you spent, okay, so we go to your time at Westside, and then post Westside, what does that look like for you after your internship there? How did it shake out to what you do now currently, and what led you to being the coach that you are now?
Yeah, so by that time, Todd had left Equinox, I believe. And I was kind of like, well, I would have loved to have gone back and just continue to work for him. And, you know, continue to learn from him. But he wasn't there anymore. So I went to a different Equinox location. And I lasted about a fucking month before I wanted to give myself a lobotomy. Because it was just different, right? And we had like we won Club of the Year when I was there under Todd's leadership, and that was because we had like a fucking badass team of trainers who really gave a shit about their education. And when I went, I sort of like volunteered to like, hey, I just spent the last fucking, you know, X amount of dollars and X amount of hours, you know, learning this shit, training this way, and I'm, you know, more than willing to, you know, kind of like take load off the managerial staff's plate and like build education out for our team. And just like no one fucking took it serious. And I was like, you know what, this is not the culture that I want to be a part of, and I'm just like unwilling to be around a bunch of people that are just sort of content with their knowledge staying where you know, where it kind of keeps them making money, but not necessarily changing lives and making impact. So I said, fuck that, and left and started my own thing. And so since then, I started Delta 5 Performance, which is my company. Um, like fucking 4 months before COVID. Uh, so that was a terrible time, to start that. And I kind of had ideas for like how I would start in person and eventually, make my way into having my own facility, and blah blah blah, and like how I would kind of run that shit. Built a massive like 50 to 100-page business plan, I think it ended up being. And as I was kind of like finishing it up, everything fucking closes down. And it's like, well, fuck. And I 2 weeks before COVID hit, I just moved to Colorado. So I was in like a new place, didn't know anyone, had a business plan that I basically just lit on fire and, kind of sat there like completely hollowed out to the soul, just like, staring into it, kind of evaporating. And then, like Louis told me to do, I just shut the fuck up and I trained. And I went and like, kind of learned the valuable skill of rapid pivoting, when it comes to business, and was able to kind of build a completely new online model. And that's kind of where I started to pick up success, and actually had a shit ton of success over COVID because of it, because I was just kind of able to quickly move to meet the new market demand, which was for online training. So Delta 5 originally was a very different thing than what it ended up being till today. And I was lucky enough to kind of start Delta 5 at a new gym that had opened, just a few months even before that, in Colorado, called Gym 5, which is where I met Alex. And they were kind of in like a shit situation too, but they actually had kind of the burden of having a brick and mortar facility that essentially wasn't allowed to like let people in, for a certain period of time. So I kind of got like turned off to the whole in-person idea, but like, kind of over time, ended up coming back to it, with a couple business partners, and ended up opening a facility in Vail called Mountain Barbell. And so the three of us did that. We hit like membership cap, and like I sort of view like Mountain Barbell is like, it's in no way Delta 5, but it's also like somewhat like of an extension of a lot of those experiences. Our motto is old school, powerful training. So that's kind of where I think a lot of stuff from Delta 5, kind of came into. And I started that with a former Lehigh heavyweight wrestler. His name's Max Wessel. And then a very competitive lacrosse and rugby player, his name is Luke Dilzell, and their wives. So we all started that, and just have had like a total blast running the thing, ever since. And so, Delta 5 is kind of like an online training company at this point. I tried my hand at education, really liked it, but sort of just kind of found really no real thorough desire to kind of continue beyond a certain point. Because I just like working one-on-one with people. That's like where a lot of the fun is for me, is having an athlete kind of come to me saying, hey, I'm having a really fucking hard problem, and I need help solving it. And then we do it, and we solve the fucking problem. Sometimes it takes 3 months, sometimes it takes 6 months. Some athletes I've worked with for a couple of years, and I've just had like so much success and so much fun, kind of working on these projects. Essentially is like what I end up calling them, to get people over a certain hump and into a new threshold of performance where there was none before.
Yeah, so you're currently working with an athlete, and you're posting quite a bit about the process that you're going through with that athlete. So kind of talk about what, I know you kind of put like an open application out there. So what went into the process of who you selected, and kind of what are you working through with this athlete? If you want to talk about kind of some of your problem solving and what you do to problem solve with athletes.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, that Alex is his name. He's a MMA fighter, pretty new to it, but like brutally strong guy, and like absolutely smoked his first round, like basically just committed a felony on this poor individual, who he fought in his first fight. So yeah, to kind of backtrack. One, Alex is an awesome dude, and he just kind of stood out to me immediately upon like when he submitted his application to do this thing. Mostly because he was a fucking adult, and I mean that not just because of how his age or like just the fact that he's like a dude's a fucking man. When you look at him, but because of like the way he talked about training and the way he talked about himself and the way he talked about performance, I was like, I had a bunch of people who were older than 18, like reach out to me to train with me. So by law, they are adults, but you could tell that they were just looking for something that I would never be able to provide them. And nothing was really specific, nothing was really actionable. It was more just like, I want to get better at this, or I want to lose this kind of weight, or like blah 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 blah. And it was just kind of like, I don't actually think you do. I think there's probably like something that you need to go talk to a therapist about. Um, and then I would work in conjunction with that, oncoming information, and we'd actually work towards something that's like mentally healthy for you, to kind of work towards. And so that, Alex was just sort of like immediately upon like reading his initial message was like, yeah, this is probably going to be the guy. Because it's a free training thing. Like I'm not gonna train someone for free who I think I'm gonna be fucking miserable working with. You're allowed to pay me to be miserable. Like, don't get me wrong. But like I'm not gonna like put a bunch of time into making a badass fucking program for someone who's like not gonna do that for 2 weeks, right? I want to see what we can do in 6 months. So yeah, Alex came to me after he had just gotten a nasty injury. I might be wrong, but I believe it was like a Granby roll in wrestling, which basically just like really just wrenches your fucking shoulder down into depression. And that's he kind of like tore some stuff, not like necessarily the worst injury I've ever seen, but like kind of jacked it up. So he came to me injured. He came to me kind of like having just finished up with a really awesome PT, which was kind of like a qualifying thing for that. Was like, I need to be able to talk to your sport coach, or at least have you relay information to you from a sport coach. And I would prefer that you have like, some sort of like a third person in the mix here, right? So that we kind of have this like trio of like ability. So was able to talk to his physical therapist, who was like incredible. She gave me like tons of really good information, a bunch of stuff that Alex ended up seeing in his program right away to address his issues and imbalances and like negative compensation. And then he has a fucking sport coach who's a UFC heavyweight, and who's like really knows his shit about fighting and is helping him learn a lot more about fighting, which is helping me learn a lot more about fighting. Right. So on top of that, I mean, Alex had powerlifted for a long time. Like, he came to me being I think he's, when he fights, he's like between like 130 and 140, if I'm not mistaken. And like, dude's deadlifting almost like 500 pounds, right? And like box squatting like in the fours, and like high threes. Like he's fucking strong. Like, I was like pretty much like, I'm really glad you reached out, man, but like you're already fucking strong enough. Like, I think you just need to fucking fight. And he's like, well, yeah, like that's like, I agree with you. And like, obviously I wasn't like underselling my shit here. I was like, but kind of in the back of my head, I'm like, well, what the fuck are we gonna like, what the fuck do we need to work on? Because we're kind of at a point where like absolute strength doesn't fucking matter for you anymore. It's gonna be more about other shit. And it is just like, look, man, I'm almost 30. I need to fucking maintain my explosive strength. And then it was kind of like light bulbs started going off. I was like, oh, okay, well, like you're injured. And you're going to start losing explosive strength here pretty quick. And you've never actually trained any amount of like plyometrics or dynamic effort. You've just kind of done like powerlifting essentially. We're going to make you like really hard to tear. And we're going to make you like just build even bigger of a death touch than you already have when it comes to explosion. And so we did that. And that's kind of like what we've been working on the last 3 months. And I think to kind of go a little more macro with how I approach training, I've trained everyone for like special operations type stuff, for like a specific deployment. I've trained people for a specific selection course. Trained people just to like survive the day to day like hell that is being in the military. I've worked with like MMA athletes. I've worked with jujitsu athletes. Like a bunch of freaks, man. You know, people that are like really fucking strong, already really fucking tough, and it's sort of like, well, what do we do? Like, what do you actually need now? Because, you know, a lot of people who come to me, like, I would say like over 50% of the athletes I've ended up working with, like, were stronger than me, like at their shit, right? You want to go like do world's strongest man stuff. Um, you know, like, I agree that like we probably need to spend some time like under the bar, but that might not necessarily be what's preventing you from like getting to the level you want to get to. So I've had to really get general with my knowledge. I am not a specialist. And as much as I wanted to be like a sexy strength and conditioning guy who is like, you know, able to work with, you know, these kinds of people, these kinds of like amazing women anyway. You know, it's like I just like want to be able to like help someone problem solve, and I'll get as deep as I need to go. I know how to like, you know, gain knowledge on a certain topic, and at this point like can reach out to anyone and like, you know, kind of get their 2 cents on like where to go and what to do if I do run into a problem. So it kind of became like, you know what, you know, like what's out there, like, you know, what's like the like random corners of shit that I need to learn to help this individual get better at what they want to do. So, you know, obviously that kind of became nutrition, and then it kind of became like supplementation, and it kind of became like recovery modalities, and it kind of just became like all these awesome different things. One second, plug it in my headphones. And so like as I kind of went on with that stuff, you know, I'm like a complete jack of all trades now in my mind. And so the approach that I take with athletes is truly like a holistic approach. And it's only gotten better, right? Like I would say I have like a pretty good understanding of like the general knowledge necessary for all of the inputs that we would need to like work on the 5 major systems of the body, right? Which is why I kind of named my company Delta 5, because Delta representing change, 5 representing the cardiovascular system, digestive system, nervous system, musculoskeletal system, and endocrine system. Right. And it's like, those are the 5 fucking things that need to get better. You know, they need to do, you know, perform their roles better, more efficiently, faster. Like all that needs to be better in order for us to actually make a better athlete. So I kind of view myself as like a person who's good enough to foot the bill in all those areas, which is better than being a specialist who goes balls deep in one area, but can't actually have the athlete get better because all those others areas are holding them back. And that's kind of, you know, when I looked at like, you know, the model my high school took, when I look at the model that like the NFL takes, or like the New Zealand All Blacks, European soccer teams, like, dude, they have everyone living on campus or at the facility, wives, husbands, fucking doctors, trainers, psychologists, like everyone lives like, you know, here ready to go. And the UFC Performance Institute, the UFCPI, like, you know, kind of is like, I guess, the best place in America doing that right now. And I'm like, if you want to be really elite, you want to be really good, you want to be the fucking All Blacks who kick ass for fucking decades, you want to be like, you know, some of these like European soccer leagues that just constantly, you know, are beating the shit out of each other for these championships. Like, I gotta replicate that somehow. Because like it's you know, there's proof in the sauce there. And so that's kind of what Delta 5 is, and that's kind of how it came to be. And that's like the approach I take with all of my athletes is like, we got to have some way of discussing how all these things are going, how you're fucking it up or doing it well. And you know, the gap you need to fill might be more pound bar. But the reason that's not happening might be because you know, you're eating like a first grader. And that's not like, that's not cool. You know what I mean? That's not very pro athlete cool. guy who does their shit and wins championships. That's just not like, that's not true. That's not you.
I feel
That's
like
what you want to be.
I feel like that's the most glaring that I see is the nutrition
Mm-hmm.
side of things. Like it's the one that always sticks out the easiest now that I understand a little bit more about it. It's like
really?
this is,
Because everyone gets such good sleep all the time.
well, no, I agree with that too. I'm just saying, like, when you start like having conversations with people about their nutrition, it's just easy because it's like, boom, okay, this is easy, and then it's easy. The next step is like, okay, well, if your nutrition's in line, now you're gonna sleep better, and then if your sleep habits are bad, how can we now fix those? And then it's like, oh, the training parts kind of falls into place after that. So
Yeah, I mean, if I kind of attribute a lot of my success in the weight room and like my ability to progress like without getting injured, knock on wood, over the years with shit is like what am I going to be doing after 10 p.m., 9 p.m. anyway? Right? What value would I have added after that? In the context of like truly getting better, because I'll be the first person to admit I'm a fucking asshole when I don't sleep. And like I'm not fun to be around, and like it's really difficult. It's caused like more drama and fights in my life than probably like any other factor. So like if I'm not going to take myself seriously enough to show up the best that I can possibly be to training, then I'm not taking myself seriously enough to show up to be the best version of myself anywhere else, in any relationship, romantic, platonic, friendship, whatever it is, coach to athlete. Like I'm just a better person when I my hormones are balanced and when I fucking feel well rested enough to actually attack the day instead of get attacked by the day. And that's I think a lot of people like to pretend that hard work is like feeling like shit all the time, and that's what being tough is. But if you feel like shit all the time, like how hard can you be? And like how good can you actually be at something when it's fucking miserable the entire time you're doing it? But that's kind of like the illusion of like I personally grew up in like a hyper masculine environment, right? Like I had a dad who was in the military. I moved around a bunch, so really like I constantly had to kind of visit myself internally and looking for good examples. I went to an all boys boarding school that was like built around sports. I joined the fucking military. I went to Westside Barbell. I've been in gyms for fucking my entire adult life, right? Like I've been in like these like hyper masculine environments, and I'm not saying in any way that masculinity is like a bad thing, but there's a lot of really stupid fucked up versions out there. And I think a lot of and having lived the negative effects of a lot of those, there's like a lot of just dumb fucking shit that a lot of people think they need to do that they don't need to fucking do. And if you look at like a lot of the more traditionally feminine beliefs, which is like to take care of yourself, which is to like rest, which is to recover, which is to like be kinder to yourself, like that's where a lot of athletes, male and female, are actually seeing the most results, in my opinion. Is it's unwiring what you think toughness actually is. Because what's fucking tough is to like actually say no to the fucking dopamine hit and just go to fucking bed. That's actually tough.
yeah.
Depriving yourself of fucking sleep intentionally is not tough, because what you're probably depriving yourself of sleep to do is just going to go lick the lollipop of dopamine that you're going to get. Right. And that's fucking bullshit. And that's true with nutrition too. Like, like I just want to have this X meal because like it's gonna feel good, or I don't want to eat right now because like it being hungry is fucking makes me tough. There's like two sides of the extreme there that are really just shaped like a fucking horseshoe and end up being the same fucking problem. And it's just like this pursuit of being tough, or this pursuit of like overindulgence, either stripping things away or adding way more stuff to kind of satiate your need to feel comfortable. And really, like in my opinion, and I think it's like relatively provable with science at this point, is just like stability, like stably like keeping yourself in a realm of feeling fucking good enough, like have the confidence to be badass at what you're trying to do, and maintaining that for as fucking long as you can, and actually outright defending it against shit that's getting away from. And that to me is like that's fucking training. That's shutting the fuck up and training, right? Is when you actually do that instead of doing a bunch of other stuff. That just isn't making you a better person every day.
Alex, have you been sleeping since you downloaded Age of Empires again? Is it cut into your sleep time?
Only one night that happened.
I was gonna ask you about that. Yeah, man. The old Age of Empires, that can run into your sleep schedule a little bit.
Dude, I played one game.
Yeah.
Guess how long it took?
Oh, I bet it was 12 hours at least.
That's a
4.5.
Yeah, 3 to 5, right? Fuck.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
Age
to
of
be
Empires?
fair, like, go ahead.
Well, which Age of Empires was it? The first one?
It's the second one.
Oh, okay. That makes
They
sense.
just redid it for Xbox.
Yeah, yeah.
And added in some things to make, like you can have 500 people instead of 200.
Oh, dear.
Oh dear is right.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
Oh dear is right.
Oh, man. What faction?
That's
What
good.
faction are you playing with?
I picked the Vikings, which was a mistake because they had like no ground units, but I crushed everybody with boats.
Alex the Conqueror.
Alex the
I
Conqueror.
owned North America and South America. So.
There you go.
Good word.
How's the?
I'll be the first to say too, man. Like I fucking like when Diablo 4 came
Yeah,
out,
there you, that's what I was
or,
gonna
like,
ask.
any shit that like I like to play, comes out. Like I budget time for fun. Don't get me wrong. That's like a huge part of like why I do all the other shit is to like when it's time to have fun, I can actually have fun. And like I'm not gonna like if I lose a night of sleep, like okay, I'm not gonna feel it, right? Like it's not gonna be that big of a fucking deal because guess what? I just slept 3 months in a row of like near perfection, right? And it's like what
Yeah.
like one night of like treating myself to a video game that makes me feel like I am a really cool demon slaying badass. Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Sanctuary Calls, my man. Sanctuary Calls.
Man, it sure does.
It's a good one. I didn't know that I was gonna do it and play it, but man, I've enjoyed it so far. It's been pretty fun.
It is a good one. Yeah, fuck yeah.
It's not as good as 3. Well, not as good as 2 at all, but 3 was kind of meh, but like definitely not as good as 2. 2 is by far been the greatest adaptation of Diablo so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I actually felt myself a lot more engaged with 2.
Yeah.
I started playing it on the remastered version, kind of to prepare myself for 4, which I thought would be really fun. Which it is really fun. But
Yeah.
I don't know, something about 2, man. They just kind of nailed
4's story is
Goldilocks zone.
a little lacking.
Oh, it sucks. Yeah. There's basically nothing I found endearing about it in the end. I was like, yeah, this kind of fucking was terrible.
Yeah. We're just playing hide and seek the whole time. It's like, oh, she's just a little further ahead of me the entire time until the very end. It's like, oh, okay,
Yep.
Cool.
Like, yeah, it's pretty point A to point B. I mean, I just feel like I get they needed to put a lot of time and energy into like all the gameplay and like loot, like environments, graphics, all that shit. But I was like, I would have taken a 5% hit everywhere else to get a 20% increase in this story because holy fuck.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
It was almost to the point where I was like, I don't care enough to like finish this campaign. But then I did because it was like my buddies wanted to play some of the season 1 content. I was like, all right, well, let's do that.
Got to do that. Yeah.
Yep.
They got to dangle the carrot. Now all the season stuff comes out and it's like, oh, God, here we go. How far down the rabbit hole do we want to go? Yeah.
Yeah. How bad is this going to get?
Yep.
Because a lot of other video games get pretty bad with that shit. But
GTA's on 10 years, bro.
I still don't know how that's a thing, how people keep spending that money, but you know what?
Season
more power to
season passes, baby.
Rockstar or Rocksteady, whichever one it is that made.
I'm so tired of the subscription-based model that video games has gone to, or the battle pass model, or the whatever, where you have to buy X to get YZ. It's just like, this is terrible.
Yeah, I remember earning my shit in the slums of Halo 3 and Halo 2, where it was like, I will have to play like 20,000 hours and actually fucking win.
Right.
Which is maybe where I get some of my framing for training here, is like, I actually have to go fucking win and like go play like competitive and like be in this enough to get like the Hayabusa armor in Halo 3, or like the recon helmet in Halo 3, which was like, basically like as hard as becoming like the next Taylor Swift. You know, like fucking hell, that shit was intense.
Yeah. Then nobody understands the grinding of camos anymore. I feel like with like Modern Warfare 2, or like where you had to actually get the headshots and do all that crazy stuff. And video
actually
game.
had to get good and have some skill.
It's so sad. Like my brother and I were talking about this the other day. He's like, man, video games are like $70 now or more. And it's like, it hurts me to pay for that now because there's just nothing that intrigues me anymore to spend that kind of money. Whereas like when we were kids, they just pumped out good games and I felt like it was worth every penny that I made. And now I'm like, God bless, I have to spend $80 on this game and I don't even know that I'll like it. That's what sucks.
Yeah, but $80, and if it's good, it's like 20, 30, 40, hundreds of hours of entertainment.
Really, yeah, if you're lucky. If you're lucky, though. That's what now. This it's a coin flip now. Like everything's a coin flip because they do all this like beta and alpha testing, and it's like, well, your game never should have left alpha, you idiots. Like it's still an alpha. You just released it because you wanted the money. So, ugh.
Yeah, I find the video game video game industry like super interesting right now because I'm like, if you understood anything about like stuff we do, right? Like, you know, actually earning dopamine and like gradually progressing like in earning shit, it'd be like, you know, if I just walked up to someone on the street and said, hey, you're in the NFL now, they would be like, oh, that's cool. And then we'd like, you know, like it honestly wouldn't mean much to them. But like the kid who's like, you know, worked in his basement lifting weights and watching videos and like, you know, eating right and just trying to like, you know, trying his damnedest to get there, and then he ends up getting there. It's like two very different things. And so like when you're gifted this armor, you know, that like should by all intents and purposes be like virtually impossible to get unless you're like cracked good and can like do this stuff, like it just kind of like takes I don't know, a lot of, in my opinion, like the value of video games, right, is like we're like, hey, I can go do something that doesn't wreck my body, but like I have to go like actually try and get good at it, right? Which is why like I'm a huge fan of this video game called Elden Ring, and like really any game from like From Software, who's like the game development companies, because like you don't get to set the difficulty and you don't get to like pause the video game. It's like you're like, you don't get to like just quit and leave, like, and if you do, you're just gonna like restart having lost all your experience. Like, you know, you actually have to like build some strategy, get good at like timing your shit, like dodge really well, like end up like actually going out and finding really good gear and like building a fucking character that means something. You know, as opposed to just being able to buy the ultimate power move 5 minutes into the game, or just being gifted, you know, through either nepotism or sheer luck, you know, the entry pass to somewhere you don't fucking belong.
So did you play? You must have liked Dark Souls then. Did you like the Dark Souls game?
Oh yeah. So Elden Ring was actually my first From Software game, kind of at the tail end of COVID there. So I still had some time for that. I had played like The Witcher 3, which obviously not a From Software game, but I was kind of like, you know what, I'd like something a little more challenging than that. And so I went into Elden Ring, and then was like, oh, like fuck yeah, I am like, this is. I like beating my head against the wall until I figure it out. And like, you know, kind of like, honestly, like feeling a little bit like shit about yourself because you're not good at it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like you can quit the game, but then, you know, you kind of end up becoming exactly what the game tells you shouldn't be, which is like, you know, tarnished or hollow or whatever it is in like the Dark Souls universe. The only way you lose is if you quit. And that's, I think, like a message that shines true in all their video games. And I think that's like a fun, low stakes way for people to kind of like get into the lifestyle of, you know, doing hard shit because it's good for you, and makes you a more interesting person, a more fun person to be around, you know, a more valuable person because you can and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the Dark Skull things like really bothers me because they have the death counter there, and so like when you watch your death counter just keep going up and up and up. We lost him.
Can you hear me? My headphones died even though I plugged them in, so I don't know what happened.
We got you. We can still hear you.
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Uh-oh. Is he there? Yeah, there he is. Okay. Yeah, the Dark Soul thing will make you mad because it's like it keeps your death counter for you, and so you're just literally, oh my lord, those people that make those speed runs that do death counter, like they try to do it in as few deaths possible, and they're like under 5. I'm like, holy cow, what is wow?
People who make it through the whole thing not even getting hit.
Yeah, crazy.
Like if I get hit, I have to restart the entire game, and I'm like, I died 700 times before I made it. Period, bro. Like, what? Yeah, it's insane.
So frustrating.
So frustrating. But it's like it's like super satisfying when you kick the shit out of the boss you haven't been able to beat, haven't been able to crack the code on. That's like, mwah, that's good stuff.
Absolutely. Alex, I'm waiting for you to chime in, brother. You're just sitting there patient. Are you patiently waiting?
What do you want me to chime in with? Yeah,
I don't know.
I let the guests talk.
Yeah,
what do you want me to do?
I'm just looking for your gauntlet of questions now.
I don't have a gauntlet of questions.
Well,
I ask Cooper questions all the time.
That's true. Yeah. Also, thank you for being responsive, by the way, on Instagram. Because like I was telling people, like I don't know. Like I told Pat this too. I'm like I don't really know any of you people. Like I've met some of you. Like I've just met Alex really, but I know all of you by association. I feel like, and so when I reach out to you guys and you respond, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this is a pretty good tight group of people. It seems like. So I appreciate you answering my questions that I have.
Yeah, completely, man. Completely. I'm happy to answer any follow-ups you have to anything too. If you need me to.
My intern also, he had some questions or had a question. He was like, he needs to talk about the sleep stuff that he's doing right now. Like ask him a question about the sleep stuff. Cause I saw you doing it and I think Pat's doing it too. And that's the company that you were talking about that Tom, is that the one that Tom opened up? Okay.
Todd.
Or Todd. Sorry. Excuse me. Todd.
You're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about my sleep journey because it's been bad. Like really, really fucking tough. I think just again, because of like that, like, intense there, but impact is making like shit really unhealthy. Kind of idea, where I was sort of told at a very young age that like you should be able to do everything that you do with sleep without sleep. And while I find that valuable, and I certainly have a good sense of control over when like my hormones are all out of whack, not letting them get the best of me in terms of like what I say and how I say it, and just like having a good attitude and bringing like a non shithead dickhead energy to the table. But when you're 50 days in a row of like sleeping like shit, you can only be one thing, and it's tired as fuck, angry as fuck, and feeling like you just want to fucking jump out of your own skin, right? So I had really unhealthy sleep habits my whole life. I would say really in the last like from 26, I've had 3 years where sleep was good in that entire time. And there's a lot of things that go into poor sleep, right? Like poor diet's a factor, poor training is a factor, over upregulating your nervous system or under regulating, upregulating your nervous system, light exposure, sort of like there's all these factors that go into this shit, right? But for me, where it started to get like really messy was concussions. So I had my first concussion when I was a kid. My parents threw me in some like acting theater type class, just to kind of, have me do something in the afternoons that wasn't fucking, playing sports. And I got like dropped on my head. Like people were holding my arms and legs and swinging me, and like someone just let go of my arms and my head like snapped back. Vision got fucked up, was like puking. One of our doctor friends came over, I guess my parents' doctor friend is not my fucking friend, especially not after the shit advice he gave me. But he came over and was like, he's fine. He'll be fine to go to school on Monday. Just have him sleep a little more this weekend. Meanwhile, right, like if like the symptoms of a concussion, like I probably had a pretty bad one. If I'm throwing up, if I can't really see straight, if I can't like look at any amount of light and do shit, right, like that's pretty fucked. And I think like if you kind of know what happens when you have concussions, that was my first of I don't even know how many. I got 3 in one season playing football. Because I just got thrown right back onto the field as a 5th grader, being told like, yeah, like you can, just get back out there and be tough. Like, yeah, you got hit in the head, so is everyone else. Meanwhile, like knowing what, like my neck was like super thin and super weak, and you put like a fucking 10-pound helmet on me, so like, it just creates like a million pounds of force when I go this way or that way against my head because I don't have a strong enough neck to actually fucking resist shit. Right. And then like I had a boxing coach who like rocked my shit before I went to West Point. Just kind of, I was a strong kid at that point, and was able to like definitely stronger than the average man, and was like able to, catch him with a few good punches because I was a, pretty fucking good athlete. And like he just like ended up rocking me in the fucking dome about like a month before I left for West Point. And so like I basically went into that whole experience with the concussion. My senior year of high school, I'd been knocked unconscious. And kind of had like, a couple, pretty bad concussions just throughout playing lacrosse and wrestling, the years leading up to that. So in the teens, and then none of them recovered. None of them were sort of treated with the appropriate level of give a shit factor that needed to be. And you can say like people didn't know like shit about the information and all that, but I've done more research than maybe anyone I know into the effects of concussions and what they actually end up doing to the brain and the mental health and the body. And like this shit's been being talked about since the early 2000s. People have just been ignoring it and kind of covering it up with science that fits kind of their views on shit. So again, to get back to that, like, hypermasculinity, be tough, get on the field, fucking kill yourself, and do all that shit, right? Like that's how I was raised. That's how I was told to do things. And then when I had the testosterone of a 70-year-old man, and couldn't sleep cleanly through the night to save my life, and was having like horrible suicidal ideation at West Point and like terrible depression and anxiety, to the point where I would stay awake for 3 days and then feel like I needed to sleep for 3 days in a row. It was like, like this, something's fucking wrong here. And it's not because I'm not tough. There's no way you can fucking tell me after surviving like this for nearly 2 fucking decades of my life to this point that I'm not fucking tough. Right. Like it's not my fault. And that was when I sort of, backed out of West Point and was like, fuck this. I hate this environment with or without concussions. Could have. And then, started going down the rabbit hole. I've read like 3 books, I think, on like head trauma. And, really at the end of the day, there's a lot of avenues to actually get the brain in the state that it gets into when it's like really, really fucked up. And a really, really fucked up brain that still functions and still allows you to survive and go through day-to-day life kind of looks like this. It's, imagine if you like shined a light over an area, right? And like only one part of that actually reflected light back to you, right? When you have a concussion, it's like 90% of the shit that like is technically non-essential to your survival, but is entirely essential to like actually thriving, just shuts off completely. And they found that like rape victims get their brains kind of get put into this position, survivors of abuse, people who've been in like horribly abusive relationships, right? Like all these different avenues kind of result in this brain where it's like literally damaged to the point of like essentially, yeah, you're gonna make it through day to day and you're gonna be able to have like conversations with people, but like not a lot is really happening, and it's a very slippery slope to mental health issues and just like complete and utter chaos, internally and biologically that comes with that. Right, because you're essentially shutting off your nervous system and your endocrine system at that point. And there's a lot of people that don't necessarily have like the abuse or like the actual physical blunt trauma that like results in the brain being like this, whose brains actually fucking end up like this because they don't give the brain enough inputs to actually have to keep those parts running in the first place. And so you don't fucking need sleep to survive. like you need it, like, you know, in certain amounts, but like the amount you need to survive is this much. I've gone like 4 days in a row without sleep to the point where I was like hallucinating. Like you can fucking survive, man. Like it's possible, right? And you will, but then your body will like be like, oh, turn this area on for 5 seconds and let's like let you sleep, you know, for like 24 hours straight so that you can actually like bounce back. And then we'll just like whatever 4 days again. And then it's just like I was going through those horrible cycles for years, man. Like, you know, where it was just like I have been awake for way too much of my life at this point. And that's kind of like how I view it, as just like it is just like not fun. You know, like to not sleep and to have that be a massive issue. So the way I kind of repaired things was first I went to a doctor out here in Boulder after like, you know, kind of my first year of doing Louis GPP stuff and like eating really well and like, you know, taking my sleep seriously and all that. Like I had like, you know, good response and like felt a lot better and everything, but my test was still only like in the 300 range, which is like not really enough, you know, to actually produce some meaningful change in the body, at least in my opinion. Right? Like, especially if you're going to train hard. So I was like, you know what? Like, I'm 23, I think I was at the time. I'm like, I am basically already 30 internally. And my test is only going to get worse. I've eaten well for like a year to this point and like made marginal change and still kind of feel like shit. And I'm still getting kind of injured in the gym. So I went to a clinic out here called Rocky Mountain Regenerative Medicine, worked with a really awesome doctor named Dr. Vasily Eliopoulos, just call him Dr. Boss. And he prescribed me testosterone and HCG. And that was like the first like major step I took in terms of like using like really extreme chemical interventions to kind of better my better and better training, my business, who I was just like as a person in the day-to-day, right? Like everything kind of felt better and got better at that point. From there, it was really like, you know, there's still just like an underlying issue. And I went through a divorce. When would that have been? 2021 to 2022. And so just like the stress of all that, plus like the stress that had come from COVID and like restarting my business, you know, like pivoting everything on top of like opening the gym up in the mountains, which was like 6 months behind schedule, anywhere to train anyone up there, right? Like there was just like a lot of shit. And I was driving somewhere one day and I was like, forgot where I was fucking driving to. Right. And so like my brain had essentially like given a very massive signal to me that like there's a lot of areas still shut off in your brain that need you know, like probably more extensive inputs. And I had done like supplement protocols like crazy for years. And I'm like, I think I need to pay a doctor to like really fucking help me with this, because it is not just tests and it's not just these inputs and it's not just these hormones. It's like there's like shit that's like going wrong, and I like having like dementia or like some sort of Alzheimer's, like, you know, the initial sort of like dip into that. And that was really fucking scary for me. You know, that was like sort of like a very harrowing moment for me where I was like, turns out I was driving to the fucking grocery store, and I just was like on the highway, like, where the fuck am I going right now? You know, and that kind of was like, you know, like, yeah, like I had horrible mental health issues growing up. I've, you know, just gone through like one of the harder years of my life. I'm financially stressed out for the first like real significant time in my life. You know, I'm feeling like the weight of all this, and like, you know, I'm living in like one of the like worst suicide rate places on earth, which is like the mountains of Colorado, because they're so isolated and just like so far from like civilization, the way we you know, kind of define it, in a way that's like accessible to people who aren't making $10 million a year. and so it was sort of like, well, I need to spend some fucking money and figure this shit out because it's not working. And I'd used like red light panels for years to kind of help with like ankle injury and like just other nicks and dings that I got from training, and kind of like understood that like it brings blood flow to an area. And like some papers and books I'd read, like, blood flow to the brain is one of the best things for concussion, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, well, right. It's sort of like there's a certain parts of the brain that aren't reflecting to them, right? If that kind of analogy is, if you'll bear with me on that, right? Like shit that's close to your bone, tendon, ligament, all that stuff. And then started to kind of put two and two together that would also do that to the brain. Red light is too like the body's too overprotective and the skull's too thick for a red light panel to actually penetrate through it, plus the addition of your head. Can you guys hear me?
I think we're cutting in and out, I think. Hold on.
Okay. What was do you need me to go over that again?
Yeah, you probably got to start back over at the red light panel thing.
The red light thing might need to be redone.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. Can you guys hear me okay now?
I think
so far so good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so with that, right, like, brain's not able to reflect back to you what you are actually seeing if you shine the light up to it, right? If it's just certain areas are not giving you that signal back that they're active and that they're tracking on the signal that you're sending it. With red light, right, what I kind of put two and two together on was that like red light makes a lot of sense in terms of actually activating certain parts of the brain that aren't receiving blood flow, because it does that for every other tissue in your fucking body, right? But then after a little more research, I was like, well, it doesn't actually work like that because it doesn't penetrate the skull and it doesn't actually get through the hair. So it was sort of like, well, how the fuck, like, can I leverage this? Because like, I can't really like sear them out of my head. Does that kind of make sense so far with what I'm saying? So then I, just like kind of did more research into more technologies and ended up finding a Vilite, which is this awesome company that does intranasal red light units, as well as units that will like surround your skull and kind of have a certain flicker rate that, goes along with certain brain waves that you may want to accentuate in one direction or another. So I used that and was pretty much able to like reverse all the memory issues I was having, of which there were a lot, right? Just like forgetting appointments with athletes, like forgetting that I'd scheduled something with a friend, and like completely like made it seem like I was like just giving him the middle finger, which I wasn't. I just genuinely was like forgetting everything I was fucking doing, for like a good 6 months of my life. So did that, had massively beneficial results. But still kind of was struggling with like the post-traumatic stress, of just like my life to that point, so to speak, to belabor any long-winded story about that shit. And so I was like, well, what am I going to be able to use to rewire the faulty pathways that are leading to just like anything is causing anxiety, everything is causing depression. And I'm not able to fucking sleep to actually let any of this shit recover. So I paid a bunch of money, more than I'm comfortable admitting, to go through like really, really extensive ketamine treatment, at a clinic up in the mountains. And like made a stupid financial decision, honestly, in doing so, because I just like burned through an entire credit card. But it was sort of like, I do this or I fucking die, right? Like, cause like at the pace I'm going, like, I don't want to live like this anymore. And like the way it's going, if I have to live the rest of my life like this, like there's no fucking point. Right. And it got super dark and it got super uncomfortable. But with the benefit of ketamine and the benefit of the Vilite, and kind of tweaking a few supplement protocols here and there, what I was able to do was rewire neural pathways using ketamine, so that I could make better associations from some of the older negative ones that I had, with just, life in general and certain things in general. I was able to bring blood to my brain through Vilite, right? So to actually like illuminate areas that would be worthy of rewiring, with the ketamine in the first place. And on top of that, just like do my best to sleep as well as I could and train as hard as fucking possible to keep me feeling like I'm progressing in something in my life. And so that was the approach I took to sleep. And unless my AC is broken, and I just am sitting there sweating through the night, like I can sleep extremely fucking well now. And so all that's to say is like the addition of stuff from Todd's company, Dream Recovery, right, has just like been the icing on the cake of like all these healthy habits and all these like interventions I did over the years, to this point. And so the addition of like the sleep mask to make sure it's truly zero light coming into my eyes at night, the addition of the mouth tape to like make sure that I'm nasal breathing, which is going to be way more down regulating than mouth breathing, using like the appropriate sleeping temperature on my AC, because that's like research that Todd had shared with me. Keeping it at like a crisp, like 65 at night, reducing blue light before bed. On top of all the other shit I'm doing, I would say I sleep better than like most anyone I know, unless like one of those things gets thrown out of whack. And I still have a long way to go, because after sleeping like shit and having like all sorts of, these just like traumatic and difficult and hard events that like really kind of fucked my brain up, it's gonna take another 2 decades to like probably recover to the point where like I'm safe, and healthy from like any major relapse. But kind of to go back to what Louis said, you just got to shut the fuck up and do it. And so that's where I'm at. I've shut the fuck up and I've done it. Spent a lot of money, did a lot of like money I didn't have, and like took a lot of steps, and like just stayed really disciplined with stuff that would work, and eventually would work, and like continues to work, even though like I sat there doing all this shit for years. It kind of like eventually broke through there, and it's like it's great, things are going to spiral upward just as they can spiral downward. And that's kind of my little spiel on sleep. I also don't drink ever at all. Really the only thing I do is microdose rooms, and have an edible every once in a while. So a little bit of THC, a little bit of the mushrooms kind of just help with that low level rewiring. I don't even really feel the effect of them when I take them. They're also decriminalized in Colorado, so kind of allowed to use them, so to speak.
And they're kind of everywhere all of a sudden.
Yeah, they're popping up everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, that's where it's at. It was really hard, and it took a long time, and it didn't all work at once. But I would say that like as of probably the last like year, I've had like incredible sleep, and this is one of my years that's been fucking stellar. And it feels cool. That feels cool.
That's well, it's the commitment and the investment that you made to actually make that aspect of your life better is pretty applaud worthy, to be honest, because of like just normal day conversations I have with people that won't invest in themselves to try to make smaller changes than to what lengths you went to just finally get some relief in your life. And that avenue is pretty applaud worthy. So I commend you for that. That's pretty cool.
Appreciate that. Yeah. It's, look, if you don't take yourself seriously, no one else will.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And that's tough, but that's true.
Did you lose sleep over the first time you met this guy? You met Alex. Did you lose sleep over that? Did that disrupt your sleep schedule?
A recurring nightmare of mine is, kind of, whispering things that I think Louis might have said, but are coming out of his mouth. Just like your calves aren't good enough.
What's the worst thing that Louis ever made you do?
What's the worst thing Louis ever made me do? I have a lot of bad things Louis made me do.
Let's go top 3 then.
Here we go.
Well, so I got there the first day. And if you know anything about West Side lore, which like you definitely shouldn't to the extent that we probably all do, it's like it's it's fun to talk about, but it's like why the fuck do I why did I hyper fixate on knowing so much about this shit? If you know what a supramax squat cycle is, it's the end of a powerlifting cycle where the lifters at Westside would load something like 50 to 60% of their 1 rep max and like band tension onto the bar, and then put about 50 to 60% of their max, or maybe 40 to 60% of their max in straight weight on the actual bar itself. So you're getting like 100 to 120% of your most recent 1 rep max on the bar at the top. That was my first lift at Westside. And mind you, I never equipped powerlifted. And mind you, I just spent the last 3 years becoming a fucking fish and becoming a goddamn gazelle so that I could be a good Marine. So like I squatted, like I could squat like mid threes, you know what I mean? Like I was still like fucking strong relative to like anyone else I was with at like boot camp or anything like that. Like I was like super fucking capable for the specific thing I had trained for, which was not equipped powerlifting, which is exactly what I was shown the first day there, was like the hardest version of it that you can do in training according to Westside. And yeah, dude, I got fucking stapled against 400 pounds of band tension, and Louis was like, why the fuck did they bring me this kid? He literally said that out loud. Like, why the fuck did they bring you here? And it was sort of, I was like, I knew Louis was a dickhead going into this and like wasn't going to be the nicest man I'd ever met in my life. You know what I mean? But I was just sort of like, yeah, dude, like, I don't know why they brought me here either, but here I am. I promise that like, if you let me do this again at the end of my 8 weeks, I'll fucking blow this out of the water. And he was sort of like, yeah, okay, like, fuck you. Let's see. And so over the next 8 weeks, I remember the most sore I got was when he made me put 200 pounds on a yoke and just run around the building 3 times. And like, not like walk, like
run. And that's not a short distance.
No.
Fucking like beat, like run, establish a time, and then like, we're going to go beat it. And I was just like, yeah, that sounds awesome. But I did it, right? And I came back, almost fucking buckled my spine by the time I, got the bar off in the rack, but I did it. And he said the fastest marathon runner he'd ever seen do it, that came through Westside, did it in like half the time I did. And so I was just like, yeah, well, fuck me. So then there was one that was hard, but not because he made it hard, because I made it hard on accident, which is where so we just finished a max effort workout, and I remember it vividly because I did a Zercher sumo rack pull, and like it was one of those max effort attempts where like if you put a feather on the bar, you wouldn't have gotten it, like it was bad, it was grindy, and it fucking sucked. But I got that rep, and then he was like, that variation's a waste of time, because it's only concentric and you're not really getting that much of a range of motion, so go do your 5 rep max back squat. And I was just like, okay, got it. Like, my spine's fried, everything really fucking hurts, but like, I'm gonna listen to the man and I'm gonna fucking do what he says, because I'm only here for 8 weeks, and like, if I die, I die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, glory over everything, so to speak. Even though I was only like squatting a few hundred pounds at the time. And so I did it. And then we go through like a horrible list of like accessories, belt squat, fucking RDLs, fucking whatever. And I'm shot. Like, we make it to the end. And he said, the really tough guys that I've ever trained would then follow up the lift with another max effort. So go max out a hack squat. And this is where I kind of got confused, because he and I had different definitions of what hack squat meant. They have a hack squat machine, which I went and did a 1 rep max on and nearly shot my fucking patellas through the ceiling. What he meant was a barbell hack squat, like the deadlift behind your fucking back shit.
Mm.
So I ended up doing 3 maxes that day.
Oh my.
And that was like, one second, motorcycles going by, but yeah, so that was that. And that was awful. And like my nervous system was like beyond shot at that point. And I just remember, like, he basically told me, he's like, you're gonna dumbbell bench until your fucking tits fly off every fucking time you come in here. And I did. And it did. By the end, I felt like I was gonna blow a pec off. But you know what? My bench got stronger. And by that last day, after doing a bunch of other hard shit like the 10-minute reverse hyper 100 max. Well, let me tell these two first before I kind of dive into that to the end of this here. 10 minutes on the reverse hyper just makes you want to throw up, and your lower back can't really move any of the weight at a certain point. But he can scream at you, and you can kind of make motion happen one way or another. That was bad. And then 100 rep max of good mornings was probably like, just in terms of like raw horrible feeling, like every muscle in your body wanting to like explode off the joints they're connected to. That one was definitely one of the worst, because he was like, and you can't do any less than 2 plates. So he threw a Mars bar on my back, and I did 100 good mornings with 2 plates in a row without racking it. And was kind of just standing there resting for a lot of it. But if you know the Mars bar, and this is why Louis is a sick fuck, because he knows this, it pitches you forward like you're in a low bar back squat. So you never have 0 axial loading. So around rep 50, I just kind of realized like I was just going to have to get this bar off my back as quickly as fucking possible. And, the reps kind of started to become what they became. But again, like, your body can do a lot. It's pretty capable. And by the time I left, I squatted 500 in briefs.
Wow.
And Louis was kind of like, that was the one time I think I ever impressed Louis. Was, just the sheer fact that I never had 400 pounds on my back in straight weight to this point, and let alone getting like 505, I think the number was. In like a shoddy pair of briefs that barely fit me, that he just like threw to me one day. Putting 500 pounds on my back and, getting like a really good squat and almost like passing out from it. He was, I think I at least earned some modicum of respect, by the end of that time there. And like he had, he knew how to push your buttons, right? That was like his like whole thing. I feel like when it came to coaching was just like knowing what gauntlet to throw down to you and when to throw it down to you. He sort of, used my mobility against me while I was there too. He like used me as a little bit of an experiment. When he found out I was Korean, he was like, "Oh, your hips and ankles are probably pretty fucking good then. So why don't you, come over here and do these like fucked up Ukrainian deadlifts? Try these ultra wide sumo deadlifts I've been thinking about, but no one can get into the position to do." So he knew how to like, in a way, make you feel special, right? He's like, no one else in my gym can fucking do that. But you can do that, and you can help me understand like training better because of it. So meanwhile, I'm doing like the fucking splits, my taint's like touching the ground, as I'm like trying to pull like 2 plates off the ground. And he's like, "That's really interesting. Where do you feel that?" And like blah 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 blah. And he's like, "We're gonna try this dynamic effort thing because you got really good conditioning from being a Marine, and like, we're gonna try to do your 5 sets of 5 dynamic effort, and then you're gonna do 2 sets of 15 with the same weight because I think you can just fucking do it." And he had a way of like making you feel very powerful and very strong, no matter what you were lifting, no matter what you were doing. And I think that's like where I kind of attribute like some of the greatest learning that I got from him, was just like, this is the gauntlet you throw. This is when you do it, and this is how you talk to the person as they're about to do it, after they do it, and so on and so forth. And I would actually argue that like, to like care enough to think about someone in that way, was like such a challenge to me after growing up the way I grew up. Because everyone just says you can't do it, fuck you. Right. But he was like, you can do it, and here's why, and like here's why, like, how you can train to get better at it. And so Louis did like a really fascinating job. And like I would say like it was really this year where I kind of put, a few things together that like there's a certain way you're just not going to be able to talk to people you know when it relates to their training that's ever going to build them confidence. And there's just like a certain way that you're going to always have to simultaneously be kind of hard on them and challenge them that will make them a better version of themselves. And it's like a fine line between too little or too much. But at least in my opinion, he kind of knew, he knew what he was doing. He's done this shit longer than I probably ever will. I hope to not, be training anymore, by the time I'm 80. Like I'd be totally fine to not like be working with athletes, I think, at that point in my life. And just kind of know that like another version of Louis Simmons will be out there fucking doing that shit and sharing the wisdom at that point. I just want to, lift weights, have a yacht, and play video games on it by that point.
There you go.
Which he could have had too, but because of who he was, he was a dog till the day he died.
Yeah.
Coaching and being in that gym. So.
Jeez, that's man, the resiliency to be in that gym. I can't even imagine in the first place.
It's less than you think. And I always said this because it's still powerlifting. If you want to like really fucking break someone, make them go through like a selection course, make them go through endurance stuff. Go make them run 100 miles when they haven't trained to do it. Louis knew where the line was between like killing you and injuring you, and he kept you behind it. But he let you got a lot closer to it than you were probably comfortable with.
Yeah.
Which either broke you or made you fucking realize you could do anything. And for me, that's where it was. It was like I felt like I could do anything after those workouts. I felt so fucking confident that I, little old skinny fucking 150-pound Cooper Napoli, who's like, had like a really hard time getting strong, getting big his whole life, could go in there and fucking do it. And I was no athletic specimen. I was not like perfect. I could have played Division I lacrosse at a really low level, or I could have played Division III lacrosse at like a decently high level. And that's that's not a freak athlete. That's not someone, like particularly out of the ordinary, at least in my mind, in the grand scheme of all athletes out there. So yeah, man, I mean, I think a lot of people like to make any of that stuff sound scary, but it's not. You could do it, Alex, you could do it. Anyone could fucking do it. And I think, without Louis though, I think it does lose kind of like the ability to actually scare yourself a little bit while you're there though. The way he could.
Yeah.
Which is where all the fun shit happens. That's where the real training begins.
How's your has your opinion of Westside shifted anyway? Like, I know a lot of people are kind of upset with where the business model is headed and how things are being ran now. Or like, do you see any fault in what they're trying to do and to continue on what Westside is or was or started? I mean, do you see any faults there, or like, is it okay with what they're doing still? You feel like to kind of keep the Westside, I wouldn't say style, but I would say just keep Westside alive, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of people that have never been to Westside that keep Westside alive. And there's plenty of people who are at Westside that I don't necessarily know like honored what it meant. That have like people that have been to Westside. Like there's tons of that out there, and I think everyone kind of Westside's weird, man. Like it carved out this like weird thing where like people treat it like it was religion.
Yeah.
You know, and so what everyone else says and what everyone else talks about West Side, like honestly, I don't even know. I don't even know people were beefing with how it's changed. Don't give a shit, because West Side to me was exactly what I wanted it to be and more. You know, I left there satisfied. I left there a different person, you know, like someone who was confident and did like feel like they achieved something. And I'm sure there were guys that trained there for years or like, you know, had whatever that never happened for. And I'm sure there's people who like never went there that like felt super fulfilled by like the things they learned from it. So, you know, Tom was the only man who was ever going to take that gym over. He had spent the longest amount of time with Louis. He had done like so much to like keep that space afloat. So I'm assuming people are giving him shit. If you're nodding your head, none of that's probably deserved, because not enough people actually like were there to fucking know that
Right.
like the hours that man put into making sure you could have a fucking book in your hands, because Louis didn't know how to do that stuff.
Right.
Like you probably wouldn't fucking know Westside Barbell without Tom Barry and Joe Lasco and like, you know, Dave, who works the back office, just fucking like pumping shirts out to people like to build this fucking brand.
Sure.
Because Louis didn't give a shit. Louis gave a shit about fucking making equipment that made people healthier, selling the fucking patents, or like, you know, keeping that shit going and being in the fucking gym and coaching.
Yeah. Yep.
So like anyone who like shits on Westside needs to like check themselves really fucking quick, because you probably wouldn't know a fucking thing about that gym were it not for the back-breaking 10 to 20 hour fucking days that like Tom Barry, Joe Lasco, and this guy named Dave who worked in the back office were willing to put in for that fucking company.
This guy named Dave, I love that. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate you, Dave.
Yeah, Dave probably has boxed all your fucking shirts. You know, and those guys fucking sleep there over Black Friday every year, which is like hell, because someone forgot to change their size from a medium to a fucking quadruple XL. And, you know, then you send a dickhead fucking email to those guys who haven't slept in 3 days trying to keep up with these orders. So, you know, if you want to talk shit, fuck you. You know, go figure out what it's like to try and run any company for a day, let alone one of the most successful strength and conditioning brands that's ever fucking existed or maybe will ever exist, in terms of just impact and magnitude, that I think people don't even understand.
Yeah.
There's tons of people I'm sure have hopped on a reverse hyper who don't even know Louis Simmons' name.
Right.
Or have done a box squat without knowing Westside Barbell even existed.
Is that why Tom and them are so passionate about doing the hours that they do? Is because they want that memory of Louis to continue to loop, so people will be interested in what's being put out there to continue to remember who Louis Simmons was.
I would say yes. I mean, yeah, I would say yes. Anytime I've called Tom for help, anytime I've called Louis for help, they've helped me. They've like bent over to give me really good fucking advice, and like taken a random like 2-hour chunk out of their already busy day to like help me out. You know what I mean? Like, and that's to me is like what Westside's all about. Is just like being willing to like share yourself and share your knowledge with others so that they can be better than you ever were, and ever could be. And so yeah, I you know, anyone talks shit about Westside, I'm like, you don't know fucking Westside.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, at least not the way I interpret it. Yeah, it's like it's really cool powerlifting stuff and it's really cool training stuff, but it's a lot more Batman, you know, in its dogma and like, you know, the ability to sacrifice than I think people really realize. Louis broke his neck and like came back and fucking invented more equipment and kept training so that, you know, he could die like basically knowing that he was like an example of what it meant to never fucking quit and never give up. You know, and that's what it's more all about. So you can hum and haw about, oh, like, you know, podcasts and fucking, you know, not talking as much about powerlifting and like blah, blah, blah. Like Westside's for everyone, dude. Westside's for fucking everyone. Gender, race, sexual orientation, any of that shit. Westside's just about fucking being better than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And I do think Tom, who was a fighter himself and worked with the UFC fighters that came through there and the entire MMA team that came through there for decades, is just reflavoring it from equipped powerlifting to MMA training. Because I've seen them post a lot more about that shit, and they have that awesome BJJ kid, Dante, I think Leon is his name, who I've seen like in some of their marketing material and all that. And like, good. I want people to fucking realize this isn't just equipped powerlifting, because it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
Like, you guys know that,
Yeah.
but a lot of people like at face value are just like, well, that doesn't matter. Like, but the whole skeleton of the program is where the fucking sauce is, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the actual mental shit, and like the ability to become something bigger than yourself is, you know, what it's really all about, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, box spots are cool. They're not as cool as being a fucking good dude.
That's good. Yeah. I like that. Where do you think, I don't have a lot of more questions, but here's one that I have. Like, where do people miss the boat from the powerlifting side of West Side to the athletic side of West Side and the model and the conjugate system? Like, where people are always like, oh, it's just for powerlifters. It's just for powerlifters. But like, where do they miss the boat? Because you said it's more about the skeleton, and I obviously tend to agree with that. But like, where do they miss the boat, and where do they not see the carryover into their athletes, or are they just completely terrible at reading the literature and applying it to their athletes?
Well, I'll be the first to not blame anyone for not understanding the way Louis writes.
Yeah.
For all that man is worth, and for all the books he wrote and author he was not. You know,
that's fair.
You know, like his books are written in such a way that like you need to be able to read 10 of them and pull the consistent themes out of those 10, as opposed to reading one and understanding it. And so after grading some of the special strengths exams that were submitted myself when I was there, people had no fucking clue what he was talking about. And it was mostly because they didn't spend enough time to read all the books. Now, do I think someone should have to read all the books to understand everything? No, that's bad writing. That's inefficient, right? And that's like, so there are a lot of coaches who like are told by Louis it works for everyone and it works for athletes, and that's good. But then they read that list of variations in the back of the book that were built for equipped powerlifters, and they only do those variations. And I'm like, that's what me and my friend Pat, who works in Chicago, who I also met at Equinox, who's a fucking good guy, but not Pat Hageman, Pat Sullivan, we call it boomer conjugate. Because it's just like, it's like, this is like what everyone like kind of thinks they are if they've got like boomer brain. Where it's just like, this is the way things have always been. This is how we're just going to fucking do it. Right. Like that's what that is. And that's what that ends up being. And that's what drives me crazy to see is like, okay, we're going to like try and get these kids better at baseball, but we're going to do equipped powerlifting. Like, where's the fucking improved shoulder external rotation to remove Tommy John, right? Like, where's like, you know, the crazy mobility demand? And like, you know, obviously plyos are a part of West Side, but I think a lot of people are just doing your standard box jump, drop catch shit that like doesn't work very well. It's like, where's the specific like planar motion? Where's the special exercises for this thing? Because if you look at like all the max effort variations Louis talks about in like the bench manual or the fucking like squat and deadlift manual, it's in the fucking title. This is special exercises and special preparation stuff for squat, deadlift, and bench. Not for sprinters, not for like all those other people, although it is important to have a big ass box squat and to have like really fucking strong hips. You know what I mean? And like bench, like if you can't bench 2 plates, like good luck playing like any professional sport. You know what I mean? Like that's like has contact as a major part of it. You know, like you're just gonna break. Like you're gonna fucking break.
Right.
Like you're gonna break. It's just way more likelihood that you're gonna break. And like, but then there's also like the over pursuit of like being a fucking powerlifter, which I'm like, if you look at all the best track athletes, we'll use throwers and sprinters as an example here, like because Louis gave me like old fucking like training data logs. I could never find them again for the life of me, but he handed me these like papers that he had basically like stapled together. And I was like, this is fucking cool as shit. You know, one, because I'm a fucking nerd, two, because I don't think I'll ever touch this thing or be able to find it ever again. but it was like the squats and like the box jumps and like the dynamic effort speeds of like all of the Olympic track athletes from like a certain year. I forget what year it was. It might have been 96. They all squatted a minimum of 405 for the sprinters, and they all benched a minimum of 500 pounds for the throwers, for like the shot put guys.
Good Lord.
And so there was like a minimum threshold, and a 500-pound bench is pretty fucking big. But if you're good at shot put, it's probably not as hard as like to say for me to do that, who's got like, you know, like if I stand behind some of the biggest shot putters, you won't be able to see me because their clavicles are like 7 times as fucking big as mine. You know, like in like offensive linemen, those kinds of guys, you know what I mean? Like they're just built fucking big and thick and like ready to go. And like their clavicles have like 7 times the tissue that mine does. It's like that's different, right? But like when you look at like the track athletes, I'm like, well, I'm like their fucking size, if just maybe a little shorter. And I squat 405. Why can't I sprint that? And it was like, well, you look at like the average of like the dynamic effort and the plyos and like who is the best between all three. Well, that was the guy that won. That was the guy who fucking won, right? Is like, what were their times on like, you know, like 200 meters? What were their times on like a mile? And it was the guy who, it was like just a kind of toss the coin for that day based on like the guys who averaged the 3 best. And guess what? Gold, silver, and fucking bronze were all spoken for at that point. At the highest level, man,
Right.
it is going to come down to who's the most generally prepared.
Right.
Across all the things that matter. So to train GPP is in a way to train specifically, because you need to be good at everything to get to that elite level. But I think a lot of coaches still just put an overabundance on like 2 or 3 things. And it's like, there's 20, man. And it's great that kid can squat 405, and I bet it gets you it just makes you so fucking horny when he would get to, if he could get to 500. But that doesn't fucking matter, because there was a guy who squatted 650 and didn't fucking you know, place in the top 5 you know, on that track document.
Right.
So you know, it really does come down to who's really fucking strong, who's really fucking fast, who can really change between slow speeds and fast speeds, who can like, you know, create the most tension, who can like, you know, like turn over chemically faster than this guy who's like getting into oxygen debt faster. Like it's everything. And you can't like make everyone good at everything all at once. And like even the conjugate system has like flaws in producing some of that stuff. You know, and it is Louis' fault, you know, in terms of why a lot of coaches don't understand that. But it's also the coaches who read that stuff's fault for not, you know, just like having intellectual preparation to digest something that's maybe a little above their pay grade.
Yeah.
In terms of content and material. Yep. And I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing or that you can't do it, or if you don't get West Side, you're fucking stupid, because that's just not true. But I am saying that, like, you know, had I not gone to like a good high school and gotten into a couple good colleges, even if I only went for a few weeks, like, dude, I never would have had like the inferencing skills to like put Louis' shit together, which is, again, like not the coach's fault, partially the coach's fault, mostly Louis' fault at that point. And dude, in 10 years, Tom's gonna fucking like get better at the process they're doing over there. And there's so many other people who like can speak to the conjugate system in a way that makes sense, that like Louis truly will like it doesn't matter what fucking Louis would have done. It doesn't fucking matter. Like at this point, or like what he like would have wanted out of West Side, or what he wants the conjugate system to do. Because everyone's like, go listen to a guy like Bert, go fucking, you know, listen to a guy like Joe Lasco, listen to like all these people who have like done exceptional things, you know, like with the system, and iterated on it and made it fucking better, in like every way. And like they're like, you know, like not actually understanding what Louis did, which was give away all his information effectively for fucking free, so that people could just get better than he was at the thing. And
right.
You gotta get away from West Side to really get West Side.
Right.
at this point, with where all the information's going.
Right. Yeah. I think they're doing, I think when they start reproducing the material and they start getting it to be where it's more digestible, I think it's going to be really good and clear up a lot of things for people. So like Alex and I were talking about it because I bought the new book of methods and compared it to the old book of methods and just kind of how they outlined things. Yeah. Yeah, they did. It's the one with, I don't know. They did the new artwork on it, but it just seems already more, the ease of access to understand the content is already way better compared to the old book of methods. So.
Yeah, like dude, Louis had like a, like he had an ego on him, like just like all of us do. Like when he was alive, he was like not wanting to republish his books. He was wanting to go like lease fucking cool sports cars and like have fun with the few years that he had left, and like be in the gym and train and like, like drive his athletes to other gyms. That was like something he was doing all the fucking time when I was there. He's like, I'm gonna drive you to this gym because this guy's pretty good at this, and they have this one piece of equipment that I'm really interested in, and just like, dude, like. That's why those books didn't get republished, because the man was fucking living his life for once, outside the gym, it seemed.
Right.
Which I think he earned. And but like everyone wants it to be this one thing, with this one image that they saw of Louis through the West Side versus the World documentary, or like saw because of like their old way of doing social media, and it's like, he's just a dude, just like everyone else, man.
Yeah. Well, Alex, do you have anything else you'd like to ask our wonderful guests? Because I am chock out of questions at this point.
No, I think you nailed it. Good job, Coop.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely wealth of information. I appreciate it.
Great. Glad. Hope it helps some other people push the ball forward.
Well, for the 3 people that probably listen to this entire podcast, give us a where can they find you on your socials, and if they ever have any questions, how can they reach out and get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can find me at Delta 5 Performance on Instagram, and that's really it. I don't really give a shit about social media that much.
And you gotta get on X. What are you doing with yourself?
Yeah, the further I get into this, and the longer I do it, the less I give a shit about all the social media stuff, and like any of that. And I like making it intentionally hard to find me. That being said, my DMs are always open, and I will answer anyone who comes to me with questions. And if I can't help you with my services or my training, I will put you in a room with someone who can.
Yep.
That's a problem.
Can confirm. I can confirm. That is very true. So. Coop, thanks again for coming on, gentlemen. Awesome podcast. We'll get this uploaded ASAP. But
all right, guys.
Go ahead. Happy
rest of your afternoon.
Yeah. Have a good day, guys.
Yeah.